Let me ask you an important question. Are you sick and tired of being fat? I know that offensive word that most nutrition coaches should never use. I was told in my training that I should never use that word, but I'm not here to offend you. And so before you click off, please hear me out. I'm not here to offend. I'm here hopefully to allow you to see things with a clarity that you've never been able to see before. I want to give you clarity around this subject because I am passionate and because I want you to change your circumstances when it comes to fitness and nutrition. And so the question that I get all the time is, JT, how do I change my mindset around being fit? So that, most people have tried all the things and they've done this and they've done that and nothing has worked. They've been on the diets, they've hired the trainers, they've made all the commitments on January, February, and yet they have not been able to stick to their commitments. And so what needs to change? And I'm reminded of a conversation I had with an airline executive who came to me after just going through a lot of different circumstances, a lot of different diets, a lot of different trainers. And he came to me with all the excuses that most busy people come to me with. And he said, I'm constantly in the face of temptation. He says, I'm constantly entertaining. I'm constantly at restaurants. I'm constantly at airports. I'm constantly at hotels. He says, I don't think that there's any hope for me because I'm constantly being tempted and triggered by my environment. He says, and nothing is going to change anytime soon because this is my career. It's my livelihood and I can't change my circumstances currently. I said, well, why are you here? And he said, well, the other day, he says, I was getting ready for an event. He says, I was asked to speak at an event. More than 300 people were going to be there. He says, there were 300 people in the audience. He says, I was getting ready. I was putting my shirt on. He says, I got to the last button. I realized the button was not closing. He says, I had outgrown my shirt. He says, this was one of my favorite shirts. I had just wore it a couple weeks before. And he says, I realized then that my problem was just getting exponentially worse and worse. He said, I got really frustrated because I couldn't close my button. He said, I ended up putting my tie over and he said, tightening up the shirt with the actual tie. He says, because the button would not close. It would not shut. He says, I was so frustrated. He says, I was so ticked off. He says, there was embarrassment. He says, there was shame. He says, I felt imposter syndrome. Here I was about to address this big audience about legacy and about impact. And here I am. I can't even close my last button on my shirt because I'm too fat. He says, and I got really, really, really ticked off. He said, I started to think about my dad who died young because he hadn't taken care of his body. He said, I started to think about my kids who I was providing for above and beyond private schools and giving them a great lifestyle. He says, but their dad was fat. He says, what kind of legacy, what kind of impact am I having on my kids? He says, I had already tried keto, Atkins, South Beach, North Beach. He says, I had tried all the different diets and nothing had worked. He says, at least long term. He says, I would lose some weight, but then I would regain that weight back with a vengeance. He says, and I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. I said, so then you're frustrated and you don't think you can change your circumstances. He says, I said, what do you think I can do for you? And he said, well, he said, I have a lot of conversations with pilots because I'm in the industry. He says, and one of the things I like to ask pilots all the time is when you get into bad weather, when you get into a storm, how do you change the stability of the plane? Because you obviously can't change the environment. So how do you change the stability of the plane? And he said, when I started to ask pilots about these things, he said, I started to make a correlation with my particular issue. He said, pilots mention that when they go into a storm, they obviously can't change the weather. He says, but they can change the altitude of the plane. He said, what if I could change the altitude of my thinking and change my circumstances? He says, I can't change my environment. I can't change what's happening. He says, but I can definitely change the way I'm thinking about this. He said, and this is what led me to believe that I needed to find a specific kind of coach. And he used the analogy again of airplanes. And he said, if I were to go into a storm, what kind of pilot would I want to be in that storm with? He said, I want someone who has, flown through many storms, who's possibly landed a plane on one engine, someone who understands that if you change your altitude, if you change your dynamics, if you can maneuver around the storm, that you can land that plane safely. He said, and I understood that I didn't need a coach who was just going to talk to me about dynamics because I had already done that. So I needed to speak with a coach that actually understood the storm and more importantly, could allow me to see faulty thinking. And so it led me to understand that I needed a coach who not only understood dynamics, but understood mindset. And because we've put plenty of information on the internet about your relationship to food, triggers, temptation, addiction, and the perspective from where we see nutrition from, he found us. And he said, I read your blogs, I've seen some of your videos. He said, and I needed to work with someone like you. He says, I think that you are the right type of coach. He says, but nothing is going to change for me. And he says, so that is going to be your big challenge. He says, I'm still going to be at restaurants. I said, well, what restaurants do you have at the airport? And he said, well, 𝗧𝗶𝗆s and Fridays, and there's some airports have Subways. And he said, just bad food. I said, well, let me ask you a question. If you truly had the intention to eat well, right, could you eat something healthy at those restaurants? And he said, yeah, but I just think it would be so boring. I said, okay. So we went from options to talking about entertainment. I said, it's interesting that we use the word fun when it comes to food. And he said, well, food should be fun. I said, well, we should enjoy food, but no one said that food was meant for entertainment. And he said, okay, well, tell me a little more. I said, well, we have a tendency to see food as a toy and not a tool. What if we started to see food as something that actually fuels us so that we can perform better? And he started to chuckle, and he says, yeah, I understand. He says, I know that when planes operate the best, they have the best fuel, they have the best engineers, they have the best mechanics, and they're putting the best into that plane so it can perform its best. And the guy would always go back to his industry to correlate these situations. And I loved it. I loved it because he was seeing it from his perspective. He was an expert in his field, and he was bringing that into his particular challenge. And he said, okay. He said, well, how do you eat out of Fridays? I said, it's simple. I said, well, you pick one of your proteins, baked, steamed, or grilled. You pick, 2 sides of vegetables, or you get a salad with the dressing on the side, and you just kind of dip your salad as you go, right? You're not drenching your salad in dressing. You're actually just dipping as you go. And he said, yeah, okay. He says, I just wonder how long I can do that for. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Are you committed to this process, or are you simply interested in convenience? And he said, no, I'm committed because I'm looking for impact. I said, okay, well, do you believe that we're going to have to make some decisions that are outside of your comfort zone, and that if you do that long enough, and that if you actually start to succeed and see results, that there's going to be fulfillment, and that fulfillment is going to bypass any of the fun that you're currently so focused on? And he said, I believe that. I said, so if this is true, if you are committed to this process, right? If you truly have hit the bottom of the barrel, you have enough pain, really translates to fuel in your life. I said, I think we can make some strides in the right direction. So we got on the plan. We started to really focus on his thinking at the time, which was faulty, and we started to elevate, right? We started to find some altitude, just like those pilots in the storm. And we started to focus not on the storm, but actually on what we could do, which was a big game changer, because he was so focused on the storm that it wasn't allowing him to see how to maneuver through the particular situation. The first thing we had to attack was the mindset, right? Because we think, we feel, and we act. And I always go back to this quote, and Einstein said that you can't fix a problem with the same mindset that you created the problem, right? A lot of times we go into situations and we're just focused on our current mindset, right? But we're not willing to change that mindset. If we don't change that mindset, we can't change the circumstances. So the first thing that needs to change is the mindset. The Apostle Paul said, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So your mind needs to be renewed. So there are 3 things that need to happen if you want to change your thinking around being fit, around a healthy lifestyle, around leaving an impact and a legacy for your circle of influence, more importantly for your family, right? So the number 1 thing is mindset. Your mindset around food has to change. If you're seeing food as entertaining, if you're seeing food as something that I need to do to please others, I don't know about you, but I think that is not the right way to think about it if you're looking for impact, right? Secondly is commitment. Are you committed to this process? Not just, I'm in it for the convenience part. I'm in it because I am committed, meaning I am going to do whatever is necessary to make things happen. And I know that's going to cost me, and that's going to get me outside of my comfort zone. But I understand that on the other side, there is tremendous reward, and I'm going to feel fulfilled at the end of this. And more importantly, I'm truly now with this new clarity ready to take action, because the definition of power is not clarity. Clarity is potential power. Actually, power is the ability to understand what you're facing and take action in the face of that adversity, regardless of what comes your way. And so 3 things are needed. You need to change your mindset. We need to have a new commitment around this, and we need to take massive action. If you do those three things, my friend, I can tell you right now that your mindset around food will radically change and your results will be tenfold. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. My name is JT Tapias with the Empty Your Bucket Nutrition Plan, and these are the things I enjoy speaking about, things that edify the mind, the body, and the spirit. I want to give you tangible tools that you can put into action right away that will make a massive difference in your life, will allow you to elevate, right? And will allow you to really commit to a plan. And this, my friend, once and for all, will become something sustainable for you. If we're not family yet, if you're not subscribed to this channel, please do me a favor and subscribe. Hit the like button so those algorithms can get this message out, because I believe more people need to hear this. More people need to understand that it's not all the dynamics, that it's not hiring the coach until this thing in between your ears changes. Nothing will change. We need to change our mindset. We need a true commitment, and we need to take massive action. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you're gonna love this one here. JT Tapias with the Empty Your Bucket Nutrition Plan. I'll talk to you guys soon. Ciao, ciao.